Welcome back, Tigers! In this video, we're tackling a limitation with Salesforce Quotes. There's no out-of-the-box clone button on the quote object. We'll show you how to build a custom button that lets users quickly clone a quote and decide whether or not they also want to copy over the related quote line items. You'll be able to provide a streamlined way for your revenue teams to duplicate quotes, increasing their efficiency. Now let's go check out how to help our revenue teams save time when creating quotes. All right, here we are in Salesforce, and we're going to learn how to create a custom clone button for our users to be able to clone their quotes super easy. We'll go into Setup, we'll go to Flows, and we're going to create a new screen flow. And we're going to give the user this button on a quote record. So what we need to do is first get the original quote that we're going to clone. So we're going to use the quote ID here is equal to the record ID. So we're going to use this record ID variable to get the value of the ID of the record the button is launched from. And we'll make that available for input. You'll want to make sure this says only the first record, and we're going to store all of the fields. And then we're going to give the user a screen. We're going to have them enter the quote information. I'm going to hide the header, and we're going to hide pause and previous. We're going to give the user a text field here. And we're going to ask them to enter the quote name, and we're going to require this information because it is required to create a new quote record. And the default value of this is going to be the value of the original quote. So we'll just pull in the quote name from the original quote and allow them to change it. And then we also want to give them the ability to clone the quote line items if they want to. So we'll give them a little toggle switch here. And we'll call this clone quote line items. And then the label of this is going to be, do you want to clone the quote line items? The active label will be yes. The inactive label will be no. And then I'm going to put this in a section so that it is centered on the page so it looks pretty. Next, we're going to assign the quote fields for the cloned quote. We're going to assign the values to our original quote record. And I want to change the created date. When we assign all the values to this record, it's going to take all the values without us having to map it. So all I'm doing is mapping the values that I want to change on the newly cloned quote. I want to bring over everything, but I want this to be scalable and dynamic so that I don't have to update this process every time I add a new field to the quote object. So this will allow me to not have to touch this unless we have a new field that we want to change the value for when we clone it. So I'm going to make the created date the current date time that the flow is running. And then I'm going to make the created by, it's going to be the current user. And then I'm going to make the last modified date blank. And then the quote name is going to be whatever the user entered into the screen. And then my expiration date is going to be a formula. So you can make this whatever you want. I'm just going to make it today plus 30 days. Then I'm going to clone the quote. So I'm going to do a create records. And this is going to create a record from a variable right here. So it's going to just create that record and set these values will be different than the original quote. Now I need to see if I want to create the quote line items. So we're going to check to see if the toggle switch Not used to the changes in the UI. So we're going to look for the value of this toggle switch to be true. So if they do want to clone the quote line items, then I need to get them from the previous quote. So I'm going to do a get records on the quote line item object. And I'm going to look for the quote ID to equal the record ID. And then I want to get all records. Then I'm going to add a transform element. This is going to be called transform quote line items to new records. And then our source data is first going to be our quote line items. And then we're going to map this to a record collection on the quote line item object. And then we're going to map the fields that we want to go over from the old quote to the new one. You don't want to map the quote ID because you want actually the quote ID from your new quote. And then total price and subtotal, you don't need to map because those are derived fields. Now I'm going to add in an assignment to get the quote record ID of this record right here. The reason I'm going to do that is because if you add in your quote object as a source here, it really slows down this transform element, especially if you have a lot of fields on your quote object. So I'll just do an assignment here. And you don't have to do this. I'm just choosing to do this to make this a little bit easier to modify in the future if I need to. So we'll create a new variable. This is going to be called var cloned quote ID. And this is going to equal the ID from this record, because this record ID should update to the ID of the newly created cloned quote. And then I can scroll down here to my transform element. I'm going to add a resource. And I'll add this new cloned quote ID. And then I'm just going to map that to my quote ID. Then I'm going to do a create records element here. I'm going to create the quote line items. And this is going to be multiple. And this is going to be from the transform. Then I'm going to have a screen that tells them this was successful. I'll hide the header and I'll hide the footer buttons except for finish. Then I'm going to use navigate everywhere. That is an unofficial SF, amazing little tool. Highly recommend everybody install it in their org because it takes 2 seconds to install. We'll give you the link to this package in the description. But you're just put in destination type is record, then we're going to say destination action is view, and then the record ID is going to be our variable, or we can use the ID from the get original quote to clone, doesn't matter which one we do. This is going to then route the user to the newly cloned quote whenever they click save on this screen flow. We'll call this screen flow quote, custom clone quotes and quote line items, and then we'll give it a description as well. We'll save this. Then we're going to activate that. All right, now we're going to go to our object manager. We're going to go to our quote object. We'll go to buttons, links, and actions. We'll create a new action. This is going to be invoked from a flow. We'll choose our new screen flow that we just created, and we're going to call this clone quote. We'll give this a description as well. Okay, then we're going to go to our Lightning record page. We're going to add our new action, clone quote. It's not the standard one. Did you see that one? That one that you can't use? Such a bad joke. You can move it wherever you want. You can also update the component visibility based on whether or not the quote is open or closed or whatever you want. I don't know if that's an issue that you don't want quotes cloned for certain reasons. We'll go ahead and click save there. I actually just thought of another field that we should probably map in our assigned cloned quote fields. We should probably also map the status, and we should set that to draft. No, that's up to you, because we really don't want something to have a presented status if it's a brand new quote, right? So that could mess up your reporting. So probably want to set that status as well. Okay, now let's go over to a quote. Let's go to our social media management package without email marketing. And then we see our clone quote button. We see we have 4 line items. Let's make a note of that. So let's clone this. It pre-populates with our name. Let's just call it V2. We say we want to clone the quote line items. It says my quote was created successfully. We'll click next. This should take me right to my cloned quote, which it did, V2. And then I can see that I have all of my 4 quote line items. And that's how easy it is to create a clone button for your users and allow them to clone the quote line items all in one step. That's it. That's a wrap. Be sure to subscribe to Blue Tiger Academy so you don't miss our next video that will show you how to work with discounts on quotes and quote line items. Let us know in the comments below if you have any questions or if you'd like to see a video on a different Salesforce topic. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.